the 10th Pacific Island Leaders Meeting, New Zealand's engagement with the Solomon Islands, Nauru, and Niue, U.S China competition in Vanuatu, and more. Today is Wednesday, July 31st, and welcome back to Pacific Airwaves, a podcast on the Pacific Islands from the Southeast Asia Program and the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative at CSIS. I'm Andreyka Natsalagawa, in the studio with Monica Sato from AMTI.
How are you doing, Andreyka?
I'm doing well, just keeping up with the Olympics.
Oh yeah? Are you a big Olympics watcher?
I traditionally am not, and I'm not a big sports guy either, but I just got access to Peacock, and so I've been just watching as much as I can.
So I typically only follow for the Philippines, as in typical Filipino tradition. We have a couple of people who competed in gymnastics, which I think was yesterday, but I don't think they're going to make the final round, unfortunately.
Well, fingers crossed. We'll see what happens.
But for our Pacific Airwaves listeners, there's actually 9 Pacific Island countries who are competing in this year's Olympics.
Very cool. And I think Fiji has already won silver so far, so that's very exciting. We'll keep an eye out on what happens next.
Yeah, so I guess just for a fun fact, so the 9 countries that are actually participating this year are the Cook Islands, Fiji, like Andreyka said, Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, the Solomon Islands, Tonga, and Vanuatu.
Yeah, so we'll provide an updated medal tally next month in our next episode.
We will.
Anyways, let's dive straight into the news.
So, to kick things off, the 10th Pacific Islanders meeting, or PALM, recently concluded from July 16th to the 18th. The meeting saw 18 Pacific Island 4 members and Japan convene to discuss issues of mutual concern.
Some topics on the agenda included climate change, the release of Japan's treated nuclear wastewater into the Pacific, and New Caledonia's civil unrest.
Notable outcomes from the meeting included a joint statement from the leaders opposing the use of force in New Caledonia.
And significant progress was made between Japan and Pacific leaders in addressing the release of treated nuclear wastewater into the Pacific Ocean.
Japan's Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, assured leaders that the discharge from Fukushima's nuclear power plant complied with international safety standards, emphasizing Japan's commitment to transparency throughout the process.
It's a positive development between the Pacific and Japan. Amid China's rising influence, Japan has taken steps to forge closer relations with the Pacific Islands.
In fact, Yoko Kamikawa, Japan's foreign minister, visited Fiji and Samoa in February to fortify ties with the region.
Kishida's co-chairmanship of the 10th PALM emphasizes Japan's substantive engagement with the region. And in fact, Japan has hosted a PALM every 3 years since 1997.
We'll be on the lookout to see whether the meeting's discussions move beyond vocal commitments to affect policymaking in the Pacific. So let's turn our attention to sovereign risk in the Pacific, an issue of pressing concern to the region. Andreyka, what do we have?
On July 12th, the International Monetary Fund announced that it would provide Papua New Guinea immediate access to around $125 million to encourage the country's economic development. About 2 days later, the World Bank reported developments in a proposed financial lifeline for Pacific Island nations.
The World Bank's $77 million proposal will grant Pacific Islands emergency access to major currencies for trade and remittances if Western banks cut ties, and will also investigate methods to make the region more appealing to global banks.
The World Bank's plan is expected to be approved within the next few months.
Calls for financial assistance come amid rising debt among the Pacific nations. Debt surged during the COVID-19 pandemic due to increased government spending, as tourism-dependent Pacific economies were hit by border closures and declines in international trade.
At the same time, global banks have been planning a reduction in their footprint in the region, including ANZ Bank, Westpac, and Nauru's only lender, Australia's Bendigo Bank.
The United States and Australia are playing a key role in backing the World Bank's proposal. The 2 major players were partly motivated by concerns that China would fill the vacuum after Western banks leave.
The Bank of China has established an office in Papua New Guinea and signed a memorandum of understanding with Nauru. On July 12th, Vanuatu requested the Bank of China set up operations on the island nation.
So let's move on to international engagements in the region.
New Zealand's Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters led a delegation to the Solomon Islands, Nauru, and Niue. In the Solomon Islands, he met with newly elected Prime Minister Jeremiah Manele.
That's the second time he's meeting with Manele, isn't it?
That's right. And the Solomon Islands has received significant international attention as major powers scramble for influence within the Pacific region.
On July 3rd, the New Zealand and Australian governments inaugurated an upgraded Seghe airfield to the Solomon Islands government. The $55 million project is intended to enhance air connectivity for the country's provinces.
After his election victory, Manele made his first 2 overseas visits to Australia and then China. In China, Manele visited container terminals, fishery research institutes, and a China Pacific Islands Police Training Center. Now, back to Winston Peters' other visits. What happened in Nauru and Niue?
Peters met with the heads of government of both countries. New Zealand announced that it will commit $5 million with Australia to support schooling in Nauru. New Zealand will also send public servants to Niue to bolster Niue's civil service.
For Nauru, this is the first New Zealand delegation visiting in 6 years, as questions arise over the continuation of a deal between New Zealand and Australia to resettle asylum seekers and refugees from Nauru.
In 2022, New Zealand agreed to take in 450 refugees held in Australia or its offshore detention center in Nauru over the course of 3 years. On this trip, Peters expressed frustration over his government having to keep to a deal struck by the previous administration.
The deal expires in June 2025, so tune into the podcast for more updates.
On July 3rd, Prime Minister Charlo Salawai launched the National Foreign Policy, the nation's first ever foreign policy document.
The document lays out Vanuatu's foreign policy principles and strategies, highlighting the country's non-aligned position and adherence to a rules-based international order.
Indeed, Vanuatu released a document during a time of increasing great power competition in the region. The policy paper characterizes Vanuatu as being unwillingly thrust into great power competition that has put significant demands on its diplomacy.
And in fact, this quest for influence has intensified over the past few months. Monica, what's new in U.S. and Chinese activities in the Pacific?
So the United States opened an embassy in Vanuatu on July 18th and stressed the need for increased engagements with the Pacific Islands.
Meanwhile, China donated a presidential palace to Vanuatu at an estimated cost of $21 million. China also built 2 new offices for Vanuatu's finance ministry and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Wow, 3 buildings in a row? But I heard that there are some concerns about Vanuatu's ability to maintain them, right?
Yes, that's true. Analysts worry that Vanuatu's budget shortfalls could make it difficult for the country to maintain these facilities.
And a similar situation occurred with the China-donated National Convention Center in Vanuatu before. Hopefully, these new buildings will be better maintained.
Putting the maintenance question aside, China has really stepped up its diplomatic game in Vanuatu.
And so has the United States. Let's see how Vanuatu's non-alignment foreign policy works in practice.
In addition to boosting cooperation with China and the United States, Vanuatu has also recently strengthened ties with another country in the region.
That's right, the Solomon Islands and Vanuatu just signed a border agreement on July 21st.
Yes, the document, named the Tirvao Agreement, is expected to regulate border arrangements and movement between the 2 countries.
That's right. The Tirvao Agreement is an extension of the Motalava Treaty, signed in 2016, regarding the maritime and seabed boundaries between the Solomon Islands and Vanuatu.
So with the adoption of the agreement, the Solomon Islands and Vanuatu aim to boost connectivity, trade, and economic growth.
Looking beyond security and economic cooperation, the agreement is also a recognition and formalization of their common identity as Melanesians.
Sounds like a good foundation for a strong bilateral partnership. Let's see where this agreement takes the 2 countries to.
While these 2 countries forge stronger relations, an island territory in the region doesn't seem to be faring well domestically. To close things off, we'll be giving the most recent updates from New Caledonia.
Following weeks of unrest, elections for France's national parliament prompted high voter turnout, signaling the island's desire to make their voices heard.
The election resulted in the historic win of a pro-independence indigenous Kanak candidate, Emmanuel Chibao, to take one of New Caledonia's 2 seats in the French parliament.
Chibao's win is a remarkable feat, as he becomes the first pro-independence candidate to win a seat in nearly 4 decades. However, his candidacy has sparked concern among French loyalists, given the unabated violence in New Caledonia.
Following up from our previous episode, 2 churches have been burned down by rioters, threatening New Caledonia's Catholic community. As violence escalates, organizations have spoken out to express interest in conducting investigations into the unrest. The Melanesian Spearhead Group, a sub-regional bloc in the Pacific, released a statement raising concerns of New Caledonia's apparent militarization, urging France to facilitate a joint mission with the United Nations to assess the crisis.
Similarly, the Pacific Islands Forum also expressed its desire to send a high-level delegation to New Caledonia prior to the Pacific Islands Forum leaders meeting in August.
As New Caledonia's situation raises eyebrows among the international community, we can only hope that concerns on the island are addressed as soon as possible. And
that's all we have for today.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Pacific Airwaves. Let us know what you think of our coverage by writing to our main email at searadio@csis.org.
If you're not following us already, please subscribe or give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite streaming platforms.
Our producer is Marla Hiller. Special thanks to our interns, Amelie De Leon, Schwindling Neo, and Zhang Pham for their assistance with this episode. I'm Monica Sato.
And I'm Andreyka Natsuligawa.
And we'll see you next month for another episode of Pacific Airwaves.